record. Thanks. Well, thanks everyone for attending this first meeting of the 2025 year. And I wish to start by acknowledging that I live in the unceded, ancestral and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And today, and I'm going to ask everybody to mute please, so that we don't get any extraneous sound. And Richard is going to help me mute you too. So I'm going to talk today about a trip that we did through Morocco, which was done last year. And I did this trip together with my brother from Barbados and his wife. We travel together quite often. So these are the four of us, me, my wife, Edie, who couldn't be here this afternoon, unfortunately. And I'm sure all of you know where Morocco is, but this is the area that we're going to visit. And it's just across from Spain, Mediterranean here, and the Atlantic on the left side. And our trip that we did was starting off in Casablanca and following almost this whole blue line around, except we went up even higher to Tangier, which we'll show you, and then back this way and around the coast for the trip. And we did it in a 9-passenger Mercedes Vito, which we see here. We had this driver, Mustafa, who acted as our guide and driver. And he was with us all the time, so that even when we weren't touring, he was available to take us locally to restaurants or whatever. And in a variety of places that we stopped to stay, we had local guides in those places like Marrakech and Casablanca and so on. We spent a total of 15 days. We drove just over 2,000 kilometers. So we started in Casablanca, and the main attraction in Casablanca is this mosque, Hassan II Mosque, which was built in 1993. And it's very interesting in that it's located right on the water. And you can see the corniche coming from the mosque here. You can see all around here. You can walk. And again, I'm going to ask people to mute themselves if they're not already mute. We're getting some extraneous sound. So walking along the corniche, we even encountered somebody trying to fish, which was quite interesting that he could actually throw his net from on top of this wall down into the water and hope to catch a fish that way, but he didn't catch anything while we were watching him. Inside the mosque, we were able to tour with a guide, and it's spectacular. It wasn't busy. It was beautiful. And you can see on the right-hand side picture, the part here is where the women would sit, and the men are the main level. The women are above on either side. Even underground, under the main floor where you go to wash yourself, it's quite spectacular. So if you visit Casablanca, if you can, I would say it's worth touring this particular mosque, not only looking at it from the outside. Then we walked along the streets, the pretty narrow streets in the old city, lots and lots of cats. Lots of mosaics and tiles all over the place, various places that you can access water to wash yourself. And then there's people with shops along the streets. And this man on the left-hand side, he was dressed up for people to take photographs, and he didn't want anything he wanted you to take his photograph. He didn't ask for any money or anything. He just was there. No problem having his photograph taken. One of the things that was pointed out to us that many of the buildings, the doors and the exteriors are pretty plain. But when you look inside, you can see more elaborate decorations. And it was explained to us that This was to shield less fortunate people from seeing the affluence of those inside, so as not to incite feelings of jealousy or low self-worth. And we were told that this was a fundamental notion of Islam, their religion. This is a area that everybody was selling olives. Every shop was selling different types of olives. And you can see here 30 dirham per kilo. That's about $3 or something of that nature for a kilo of olives. We were taken to the Moroccan Jewish Museum that was opened in 1997. It originally was a home for children, and it's the only Jewish museum in the Arabic-speaking world. I'm going to digress here. We're taken here. This was not our request. It was part of one of the tours that had been arranged for us. Many of you will know that I'm Jewish. And before we went to the trip to Morocco, it was fairly soon, a few months after October the 7th. And a number of my colleagues here in Vancouver said, do you really want to go to Morocco with this trip? Aren't you concerned? And they said, be careful. So was I comfortable as a Jew in Morocco? It turned out that I became very comfortable. There were no concerns, and our driver and guides in a variety of places, different guides, told us the same thing over and over again. They were very proud of the fact that their leadership, Sultan Mohammed V, and now the more recent king, was friendly toward the Jews. And the Sultan Mohammed V protected the Jews in World War II during the Vichy regime, because this was part of France. And the Germans had asked the Vichy government to hand over the Jews, and he said, no, there are no Jews in Morocco. There are only Moroccan subjects. And he said, the Moroccan Jews are my subjects, and it's my duty to protect them against aggression. At the end of World War II, there's about 260,000 Jews left in Morocco, and they were there in pretty well every town. And many of them migrated to Israel after the State of Israel was formed in 1948. Now there are only about 2,000 Jews in Morocco, but there are lots of remnants of the Jewish life in Morocco. And all the guides tried to point these things out to us and try to stress the friendly relationships between the Arabs and the Jews in Morocco, which surprised me, frankly. It was a very pleasant surprise. The current king, who's Mohammed VI, the grandson of this same Mohammed V, has been promoting Jewish culture. And if you look at the preamble to the constitution in Morocco from 2011, it talks about it being a sovereign Muslim state, but it says its unity built on the convergence of its Arab, Islamic, Amazigh, which is the native Berber population, and the Saharan Hassani, offshoot of the Berber population components, is nurtured and enriched by African, Andalusian, Hebraic, and Mediterranean constituents, so that this is part of their constitution. And you'll see a lot of things to do with the Jewish culture as we go around Morocco. We've moved from Casablanca to Rabat, which is the current capital. And Rabat is on a river, and this river separates Rabat to the south from a place called Sali to the north. And this is one of the Muslim cemeteries right on the coast, and it's quite spectacular. The main touristic thing to look at is this area called the Hassan Tower, built in the 12th century. It was supposed to be a mosque. It was never completed. And this is what it looks like today. But next to it is a mausoleum for Mohammed V, the previous sultan, built in 1969. And although there's a guard at the door, he's ceremonial, you're allowed to go inside the mausoleum. And we did, and it really is something to behold. It's just beautiful. So from Rabat, we went north toward Tangier, and we stopped in Asila on the way. And Asila has it's a small town, very small old town called the Medina, wall city, and with rather narrow roads and mainly white, the buildings, white with some blue, typically. Some of the people on the streets, again, some of what you'll see as you walk around the streets, interesting doors. It said a lot of white. The lady on the left is in the market and she's wearing a very traditional Moroccan type of hat that many of the women, certainly the people who are selling things, tend to wear. And then we went from Asila to Tangier, which is right up at the northern point. And as we approach Tangier, we come around the corner. We're at a place called Cap Spartel, and the Mediterranean is going to the right, and the Atlantic is on the left. And we arrive at Tangier. Now, this photograph in Tangier was not taken on this trip. On this trip, we were there in March. It was in the middle of Ramadan, and during the day, there was almost nobody on the beach. This was taken outside Ramadan 2 or 3 years ago, actually just before COVID occurred. And when you walk on the corniche here on the beach, you'll see this is Spain, Tarifa in the background. This is what it looked like at night when the sunset, the museum called for break the fast of Ramadan. And the streets along the corniche, which are usually very, very busy, were totally empty. Everybody was breaking the fast, having their food at home or at restaurants, and the main road was just dead, totally empty. We stayed in traditional hotels called riads, which are traditional Moroccan houses or palaces. They all tend to have an indoor courtyard like this and a garden inside, quite often, and water features. And we stayed almost always in the old city, the Medinas. When we walked into this hotel here, not very impressive, but as you go through a little further, you get into this open courtyard area, and they had set up food, not for us, but for people who were fasting and were coming to break the fast. Walking along the streets during the day, quite well kept, beautiful. And I just want to show you one interesting thing that I saw not on this trip, but on the previous trip. And this was the legation of the United States of America that exists in the old city, in the old Medina. And you might ask, why would there be this building sitting in Tangier? But it turns out that this American legation is the first American property outside the US and the only US National Historic Landmark outside the US. And it's because the Sultan at the time of the American Revolution was the first person to recognize the American Revolution. And back in 1777, there's this note. What was unusual is you walked into this American legation, there's a museum, and it was a museum that had a Moroccan Jewish wedding display. And not something that I was anticipating. So typical Jewish ketubah, their wedding dress, and next door or very close by was one of the synagogues, Moshe Nachon Synagogue. Well, we'll take you from Tangier. We then went down to Chefchaouen. And to get to Chefchaouen, we traveled from up here across this mountain range called the Rif Mountains that go from west to east along the top of Morocco. And there are other mountains that we will cross later, the Atlas Mountains a bit further south that we'll see shortly. So we go into the Rif Mountains, and here we are in the Rif Mountains en route to Chefchaouen. And this is the photograph that I showed you at the beginning. We were having a bathroom break. Typically, we had some coffee, something to eat, use the washroom, and proceeded on to Chefchaouen. It's also called the Blue City, and it's in the right in the mountains itself. Again, there's water features that are actually in use that this young man was using to get some water. You walk along the street close to where we stayed, lots of blue. At the level of the first floor, typically everything is blue. And we asked, well, why is it blue? Why is it painted blue? And some people said, well, blue keeps mosquitoes away. And other people said, well, we don't know, but maybe it signifies the blue of the sky and the heaven, and it reminds you that you should be spiritual. We don't know why it's blue. But this is where we stayed, our riad, and you can see it's blue at the ground level, and it's not blue higher up. And one of the problems with staying at these traditional riads is that there are typically no elevators. Our room was up here. So you had to lug your suitcases, sometimes with some help, often without much help, up to wherever your room was. But when we got up to the top and looked down, it was just a beautiful view down to the bottom area, the lobby area. And when I walked into our room, it was quite spectacular. Opened a window and looked out, and we were looking at the city roof lines of Chefchaouen and part of the mountains. So we went with a tour guide, not our driver, a tour guide himself, and walked through Chefchaouen. As I said, it's Ramadan, and during the day, not too many people working and doing much activities, just taking it easy. This looked like a family together. But someone who was fasting is baking, and we were able to buy some of his baking, his croissants and stuff to take with us, even though he wasn't eating them. They're there for when people break the fast. I just taking it easy, playing the guitar, and pointed out that there's a Jewish district here. The Jewish districts in many of these places are called the Melech. Melech al-Yahi, the Jewish Melech. And this neighborhood dates back to the 16th century, when it says, the sign says, the Jews were welcome to reside within the walls of the Medina. They were not in a, they were allowed to leave the Medina. They weren't forced to stay there all the time. One of the doors was open, and you can look inside and see how beautifully decorated the floor is. Not everything is blue, and so I took this picture because it's one of the few things that was not blue. And the next morning before we left, this was sunrise from our riad. And then we were off by car to travel from Chefchaouen here to visit Volubilis and then off to Fes. And Volubilis is an old Roman settlement, and it has these ruins of the Roman settlement. Lots of houses with mosaics still well preserved on the floors, as you can see here. Remnants of a temple, basilica, there's an agora there. But one of the things I liked was an olive grove next to the town, so where the olive trees were sitting, surrounded by these yellow and orange flowers. The orange for sure, a calendula. I don't know what the yellow was, but it's pretty striking. And then we were off to Fes. And Fes is the first imperial capital of Morocco, founded in 789. And it's considered the spiritual and cultural capital of Morocco. Here from a fort on a hill just outside Fes, looking down at the town. And if you look closer, this is what it looks like. It's almost like monochrome. And it has all these little white satellite dishes everywhere. The Moroccans call them white flowers, decoration for the houses. So there are lots of industry in Fez. Leather is one of the important things that they produce there. And this is a leather tannery. And I'm not sure how good it is to work in these things. These people walk around inside this liquid. Here, this guy is doing something with the leather skins, and they get paid according to how many of them they manage to get treated. I don't know how safe this is for your health. They produce tiles, pottery, woolen products. And here on the street, these narrow streets going, there's dyeing stations here where you can dye the wool here and then hang it up to dry. And lots of interesting things that you will find as you walk along the street, especially when it comes to market type of things, food, person selling eggs, chickens, beef, cow feet. You can buy camel heads. And we visited a madrasa called Madrasa Atarin, which is right next door to the University of Al Qarawiyyin. And this is now considered the oldest university in the world. It used to be said that the University of Bologna was the oldest, but now they've decided that this is actually a functioning university and has been functioning since 859, originally as a mosque, a madrasa, then developed into a center for higher education. And from the Jewish perspective, Moshe ben Maimon, also known as Maimonides or the Rambam for those who are Jewish, studied at this university. And he moved from Cordoba, where he lived in 1148, to escape the persecution of Jews by the Moors. Initially moved to places in southern Spain, but around 1158 he settled in Fez and stayed there for 10 years until he moved to Egypt. So in Fez there's a royal palace. This is the main door to the palace. We were not able to go inside. But if you look to the right here, in this street right next to this royal palace, this is the street. This is the Jewish Melech in a very important part of the city. And the structure of these buildings is very typical for Jewish architecture. It is not at all what Muslim architecture would be like, because the Muslims would not allow open balconies where people could see them, be seen from the street. But the Jewish inhabitants would have their shops at the bottom and their living areas at the top. So we'll see this repeated in a number of different areas that we visited. The Jewish district looked a lot like this as far as the architecture went. There are a number of synagogues. This is one of the ones that we were taken to visit, which had attached to it a Jewish cemetery, with unusual headstones for Jewish cemetery, taking along a lot of the characteristics of the Muslim headstones that they had there. And then from Fez, we went across the Atlas Mountains to the desert. And so if we start up here at Fez, this is the Middle Atlas Mountain first. Then we go to what they call Grand Atlas, the High Atlas Mountains, which is where the earthquake recently caused a lot of damage. And then we're in the desert with the Low Atlas or Anti-Atlas south of that. So here we are in the Middle Atlas Mountains. And then we get into a valley, and we have a lot of nomadic Berber dwellings. Berbers are the indigenous population of Morocco. And a lot of them spend their time looking after sheep and herding sheep, like this man here. You can see in the background another flock of sheep. And then south of us, we have the High Atlas Mountains. It's had snow on them. We crossed a pass to the left of where all the snow is, which was not as high. I went across that into the desert to a place called Food. And in Food, we were taken to a fossil factory. And there are lots of fossils relating to the time that this area was underwater, under the sea. And some of the fossils are obvious and they make various things with them. This is like on the top, this is like a sink that you would have in your bathroom. And one of the fossils that I thought was I'd never seen before was the one at the bottom, which are jellyfish fossils. I didn't realize that you could see fossils from jellyfish, but you do. And very close to the fossil factory, we're taken to another Jewish synagogue here in the desert in a small town. It has a synagogue, a cemetery, and a shrine to one of the rabbis. And this shrine, people come to visit on the date of his death on an annual basis. And now we go into the desert proper with the sand dunes, which are called ergs. These buildings are made out of mud mixed with straw. And I blew up this building here, the wall on the bottom here. Can you see the straw mixed around with the mud to create this wall? And I want to point out this symbol. The symbol that was on this building is a symbol of life for the Berbers. And it's part of what you will see in the flag of the Berbers. In this little village, we were taken into a place where there were Africans playing their music. It's called Gnawa music, music of African slaves. And I learned something that I wasn't aware of, and that there was a trans-Saharan slave trade from West Africa, from Ghana mainly, and from Timbuktu in Mali to Morocco, with slaves going along a trail to Marrakech. And this was going on at its maximum between the 8th and 17th century. This slave trade was present well before the Europeans came and had a transatlantic slave trade developed with the Portuguese, the British, and so on, the Spanish, and so on. The desert, obviously, to grow anything, you need to get some water in. And when they have aquifers that they find, they can direct the water along these channels to grow things. And here's how they arrange this. They have water coming along a channel with offshoots perpendicular. And people know when their time is to get water to their little plot of land. And what you do is you block the flow of water going out to one side, going out to the other side with mud. The water then goes straight, and then you unblock it where you want it to go to your particular area. But obviously they have a system for determining how many hours you can have water to your plot of land, and this is what you do to get the water there. Very simple. People grow vegetables, greens, and various things in these little plots of land in the middle of the desert by bringing water to the area. We were in a camp at this sand dune called Erg Shebi. This is where Edie and I, my wife and I stayed. Each of us had our own individual tent, which had its own bathrooms and everything. And it was right next to the desert itself with a sand dune, so we could walk out and walk onto the sand dunes. And an evening that we were there, we came in time for a camel ride. Here's camel leader leading various camels. These are single hump camels. They're dromedary camels. And this is a very typical picture of the desert. And here I'm riding my camel. Edie is riding hers. And our camel driver who took the photograph then went to put a blanket up here, and we were able to walk up and sit there to watch the sun set. You see these two pictures on the left. We were not by ourselves by any means. We were accompanied by this type of animal. It's a dung beetle that crawled up on the sand and made these tracks. And there are many of them all over the sand. After dinner at the camp, we were entertained with the local people playing Berber music along this fire pit. This is what the music sounds like. They played a number of songs while we were there. They all sounded pretty well the same to me. I could not distinguish one from the other, frankly. And there were a number of other camps in the area, and they were playing similar music. So we got up before breakfast to watch the sun rise over the desert. And so we walked onto the dunes as the sun came up. And as the sun got up higher, we got beautiful color and shadows in the dunes. And down here, difficult to see one person walking, quite small compared to the vastness of these dunes. So we left the desert from Merzouga and we're heading toward Marrakech. To get to Marrakech, we have to go across the High Atlas mountain again in the opposite direction. So we stopped to visit this area, which had kitaras. And a kitara was an ancient irrigation system developed actually in Persia 2,500 years ago. And it came to Morocco in the Middle Ages. So if we went up here and you can look down and it's like a well. A hole is drilled into the ground until it reaches water. And then if you have to plan where you want to take this water and then drill a hole going at right angles, horizontal with a slight tilt, about a 1 to 2 degree incline. And when they can't drill any further, you put another hole down from above and then start drilling further. So hole by hole by hole to bring water to where they want it. These are no longer functional. They've stopped using these now. But it's equivalent of the Roman aqueducts, but it's an underground system. So we on our way to Marrakech, we passed two different valleys and two gorges with rivers in between. So wherever there's a river, it's green and the plants grow, houses on either side typically. And you can see that these are vegetables that they're planting here, in addition to the palm trees, dates. And we're in this gorge, river is coming along, very high cliffs. Of course, people will come to mountain climb or rock climb. And I point out to you the symbol. This is the Berber flag with its symbol on it. And this lady is a Berber lady, not an Arab lady. And we were told it's very easy to distinguish them from the Arabs. Arab wear these burqas that are totally black, whereas the Berbers have color attached to their burqas, so it's not totally black. So this is a Berber lady, not an Arab lady. Just as we were driving on the streets, horse-drawn structures into another gorge with interesting rock formations on the cliffs. This is called a monkey fingers formation. And then we were traveling up this gorge through all these switchbacks to get it above so we could look down on the gorge and you can see the river passing through it. And at the end of the day, just as we exited the main part of the gorge, this was our hotel. And I had to show you the hotel. I'm from Barbados. I'm the most famous Barbadian right now, and the richest Barbadian by far in the world is the singer called Rihanna. And this Riyadh is called Dar Rihanna. And I thought that was quite interesting for me as a Barbadian. And our room is this room here that we're just looking out on the pool and looking over in the valley where they're planting again food crops. And then as we traveled further, we saw this light in the sky with this tower. And it turns out that this is the Zata or Nur solar power station. This is the world's largest concentrated solar power plant. It spans over 3,000 hectares or 12 square miles. And it has mirrors that reflect the light, the sunlight to a specific point, heats it up so that it melts salt and stores the energy as molten salt. And you can't go there, of course, it's restricted, but it's so bright you can see this light in the sky coming from where the mirrors focus the light. And now we're into the Atlas Mountains again and passing a fortified village called Ksar. And this was on the caravan route from the Sahara to Marrakech. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1987. And at the time it was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site, there were only 80 people living in this area. 66 were Berbers and 14 were Jews. There were no Arabs living here, just the indigenous population and a few Jews. The UNESCO said that they could not put anything like electricity or anything like that in this area or running water. So most of the people disappeared and only a few people are now still living in that area. Everybody else have moved across the river to where all the usually electricity and running water are available. So this place is quite picturesque and it's used in a lot of different movies. You can see starting with 1962 Lawrence of Arabia, and it's also used in TV series Game of Thrones. So it's visited quite a lot because of people wanting to see, especially now Game of Thrones, where it's part of where it's created. But, excuse me, walking in the village, narrow streets, people selling things for tourists. They're not living here. And one of the things that they create here is these paintings. And the paintings are made on this paper using saffron to create yellow color, indigo for blue, and green tea and sugar is
Yeah, Morocco. There's 47 people at it. Quite a few.
once you make the painting, it disappears and it has a blank piece of paper. And to allow the painting to be fixed and to see the painting again, they then take the painting and put it over a propane fire and heat it until it comes like these colors start to come out, as you can see here in this film. So we're in the old UNESCO place, looking across the river, which is not very high. This is the new town, which has got all the current facilities. And these are the anti-Atlas mountains south of us, which we never crossed. These are the low Atlas or anti-Atlas. From here, we went across the high Atlas mountains. At the highest pass of the high Atlas mountains, at an altitude of 2260 meters, which is about 7,000 feet high. And then we are into Marrakech. We're going to go down into the valley to Marrakech. One of the most famous areas in Marrakech is this big square called Jama'a El Fna. And it's almost deserted. Middle of the day, it's Ramadan, people are not out. So one of the problems with traveling in Ramadan is that you don't get a feel for the kind of activity that normally occurs at the other times of the year. The positives are you don't have too many people there, so you can maneuver easier, take photographs easier. And just off the square, there's this mosque that you can see here, which is the rather big mosque that you will see shortly. People were still selling their fruit juices. We were told, do not buy any. They will contaminate the fruit juice with water and you will get sick. So we did not have any. You could take a ride in a carriage. Across this road is the mosque called Kutubia. It was slightly damaged during the earthquake. This mosque will hold 25,000 worshippers in the area immediately inside and around just the outside where people can pray. We went out for dinner on Friday night, and our driver, after his Friday night prayers, picked us up and took us back past this mosque on the way to our riad. And this is the only place that we saw any pro-Palestinian demonstration in our whole 2 weeks there. And considering that there were about 20,000 plus people there just about an hour previously for prayers, the crowd of protesters or demonstrators, I should say, was about 50 to 60 people, I would estimate, very small. So again, I didn't feel uncomfortable. Here in Marrakech, we visited his palace, which is where the king would have his 4 wives, in a different room for each wife, different ceilings for each wife. And one of the walls that we looked at, the guide specifically pointed out this area here, which I have my pointer on, right here. And he wanted to note that this was a symbol showing the 3 religions together. The Muslim crescent, the Jewish Star of David, and the cross of the Christian religion, all supposedly in harmony. And repeatedly, the guides wanted to talk about the harmony and peace between the different religions. As you will tell from what I said before, in this area, this is a Jewish district, this is a Jewish Mellah, again, the typical Jewish architecture with the open balconies. And a synagogue, which is called 1492 Lazama, in Talmud Torah Street, which we were taken to visit. We went through the souks. The souk covered market area, but I was there in Marrakech many, many years ago. It was so crowded, it was difficult to move. Now again, it's Ramadan. You could almost shoot a gun through this thing and not hit anyone. It's just empty. Place that they were selling different spices, oils. Very nice how they present their wares. Outside, they tend to group things together quite well, just hats, wool, straw. And we visited a garden called the Jardin Majorel, which was created by Yves Saint Laurent and his partner Pierre Birch. And beautiful gardens. There's a museum there also for Yves Saint Laurent Museum. Lots of interesting cacti, which I quite enjoyed. And this is the railway station at Marrakech. A lot of the decorations are just quite impressive. So from Marrakech, we then went to the coast, to Essaouira. And as we drove along the road, some interesting things to see, not the safest way to travel, I guess, but that's normal there. There are about 10 people sitting in this trunk area, open area. Bathroom break, and I was on a toilet, and this is what was next to me. I thought it was a rather interesting set of pipes, different colors, so I photographed it. And we were taken to a women's cooperative where they were producing argan oil and products made with argan oil. So argan is grown in this area. This is the argan tree, a branch of an argan tree with argan fruit. They dry it, they break it open, they take the inside seed, he then crushes them, uses this crushing thing to squeeze the seeds into this dark oil. And then they somehow clarify it because it comes out as a clear oil. We were given some to taste. Doesn't taste like olive oil. It has its own distinctive flavor, but it's edible. But it's used mainly in cosmetics. And this photograph is taken in Vancouver at London Drugs. So you can see argan oil of Morocco in different products, hairspray, mousse, and different oils. And we then reach Essaouira. And Essaouira was a Portuguese fortress on the coast until the 1960s. Its Portuguese name was Mogador. Now it's Essaouira. It's on the Atlantic. The fort. And we're going to go down to this area, which is the entrance from the harbor. Some fishing boats. But as you go out into the main open sea area, there's a much bigger port for fishing, for different types of fishing boats. And people were showing off their fish and selling them, crabs. And we can notice here that these black clouds are heading our way off the Atlantic. So we decided that we should leave before we got into a major downpour and get back to our riad, which is just about a 10-minute walk from here. But we didn't quite make it. It turned out we were in the middle of a hailstorm. And hail is rather unusual there too. And so people were taking photographs of the hail, catching hailstones, doing the same thing we did in Barbados when we had a very unusual hailstorm. Didn't last very long, and we could proceed on and get back to our riad. And the next day, we're in better weather. We went back to the port, and we're taken on a tour this time with a guide. Guide was a rather sophisticated guide. She had a PhD in languages, and she took us around. She wanted us to come and have lunch here. She met up with this fisherman friend of hers who took us around to look at the different fishing vessels and explain the different fishing vessels. And then we went to where they were selling fresh fish and shrimp and various things. And with his help, we could choose which fish we wanted. He arranged for them to clean them. And then they brought the fish to a grill area out here, right by this castle area. And they put them in a grill and they just grilled them for us. And you paid according to how many grills you actually had cooked for you. And then they served it with some bread and some cooked vegetables. So it was our lunch that day, which was very pleasant. And then we went from there to visit inside the old town. And she pointed out again that this was an area that, yes, Jewish people did live, one of the Jewish symbols. There's a synagogue there called Rabbi Chaim Pinto. It turns out that many people had their private synagogue. Like this is private synagogue for this rabbi. It was Orthodox. The women sat in one area and the men sat in a different area. This chair was used by the rabbi for circumcisions. And this rabbi is considered by the local population there to be like a saint because he was very generous to the local people, especially at Ramadan. And this is another synagogue in Essaouira. And I will show you this because it's been created, next to the synagogue has been created a new project called Beit Dakira. And Beit Dakira just opened in 2020. It's called a House of Memory in English. And it's there to show the connections between Muslim and Jewish communities in Morocco. And this project was promoted by a Jewish person called Andre Azoulay. And we'll talk about him shortly, but you'll see different languages here. This is the English, Beit Dakira, the Hebrew, Beit Dakira, the Arabic, Beit Dakira, And this language that looks a lot like Greek type of letters, this is what Berber writing looks like. And they're all saying Beit Dakira. And this guy, Andre Azoulay, has been a counselor to the King of Morocco since 1991. And as the sign says here, a long line of royal counselors from Samuel Sambal in 1768 to the current counselor, Andre Azoulay. So he was the person responsible for this particular project. And inside you'll see these signs, again, combining often Arabic and Hebrew, Shalom, Hebrew with Alakum, Arabic, and Salam, the Kulam, one Hebrew, one Arabic. There's a big beach at Essaouira. So to the south side of the harbor, it's wide sandy area like this. To the north side, it's rocky. And then we went further north along the coast to another Portuguese fort that used to be called Mazagan. It's now called El Jadida. This was part of the Portuguese fortress. It is now a mosque. And here we're on the fort itself. And we're looking, I want to point out this building here. As we go closer, here's the building. Close up, you'll see that this was a synagogue. But it's a strange thing on a synagogue because it has the Islam crescent and the Jewish Star of David together, one under the other on the synagogue wall. And from up here, you could look down and see the Jewish cemetery on the outside. Now I have two pictures showing the same general area. And you'll see at high tide, there's water here. At low tide, there's no water in the same area. And what the people have done, they've built this wall with rocks across this bay, this inlet, and the fish can swim in here at high tide. When the tide goes out, fish get caught behind this wall and they can pick them up. Easy way to catch fish. And they sell the fish on the wall next to this. I'm sure they get fish from elsewhere too, not just from inside that little wall. And they have a fish market. And then there's a big market area. And again here, this one sells lots of shoes. And it's interesting that they have, this shop only serves men. Men serving men, and they can buy the thread to sew their clothes right here. Women have a different area with a different shop where women serve the women with the same types of products, so they're not mixed. But in the open market, yes, men do serve the women. And here, two different pictures of people buying dried dates and dried figs being sold. We stayed at a riad called L'Iglesia, and it has two parts, the church and the capitainerie. And where we stayed in the capitainerie used to be the American consulate until 1896. Oftentimes, especially in these smaller places, our dinners were in the riad itself. So here we are in the dining room waiting to be served our meal. So from El Jadida, we completed our tour by going north back to Casablanca, and just was a rough, windy day when we arrived back. We're just south of, there's the mosque, Hassan Dessou. You have to go across this, where the lighthouse is, to get back to the mosque itself, where we finish our tour. And I just want to finish by telling you how we arranged this in case anyone might be interested in doing something similar. We had arranged this with a company in Vancouver called Best Way Tours and Safaris, which I'd originally contracted to take us on a tour to Indonesia, which got canceled because of COVID. So we finally used some of the money that we'd given to them for this trip. And they quoted us a charge of almost $4,000 per person for the 14-day trip. And I went online and I was able to find a different provider called Flawless Travel who quoted us $1,900, almost half the price for 14 days. And this was such a big discrepancy that I didn't know whether Flawless was legitimate or not. They had good reviews, but I don't know that that means anything online anymore. But finally, I talked to the people at Best Way Tours. They checked on Flawless Travel and said, yeah, they're not an official travel agency in Morocco. They're based in Turkey, and they wouldn't have insurance and all the things that you're supposed to have to be an official travel agency. And so we decided that we would use Best Way, but we told them, you know, you need to go back and see what your people you've contracted with in Morocco can do price-wise. So they came back and finally the price was dropped to $3,125 per person for a 15-day tour because our flight it turned out to be 15 days and 14 nights. And the local provider that they used was Morocco Discovery Boutique Travel Agency. And you can find them directly online, as I was able to find afterwards. They did a fantastic job, communicated well with the driver. If we needed to make restaurant arrangements or anything, they would contact them for us. We didn't have to do any of that. So I could certainly recommend Morocco Discovery Boutique Travel Agency as a Moroccan agency that's very well run. So I'll stop at this time and see if end the slideshow, escape, and stop the sharing. Stop the sharing. And I'd be happy to have any comments, questions from anyone. You, gallery.
Paul,
Yes.
David Edgington here. Thank
Yes.
you so much for putting this together. It shows you had a great time, but it shows me I've never been to Morocco, but what a wonderful, rich culture and history and natural beauty.
Yeah, it is a very impressive place to visit. I had been a couple of times before, mainly for work-related reasons with a brief holiday, but this time I went with family and they all had a wonderful time.
That's great. I'm interested in, I guess, Morocco's early 20th century history, the French colonial period. Was there any legacy of that at all? Did you hear any French at all?
Oh, people do speak French, and there's a lot of French foods in the restaurants that you can find also.
Right, okay.
But they were quite proud that they were able to become independent from France.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alex, Sandy, you're muted, Sandy. Unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was interested in the picture you had of Fez, where you're taken from the hill, because there was a cannon on a rock formation or a wall facing out and almost like it was firing towards the city. Do you know why that was there?
No, I do not know. And I don't know whether the cannon was put there afterwards. I don't know. But it was up on a hill, and there were
Yeah.
cannons on different sides of the hill. So it may well have been that that was there to protect the area against people who came by.
Okay, thank you.
Joel? You're muted, Joel. I can't hear you. Or your sound is off.
Me now.
Yes, now I can hear you.
We have lived in Morocco for 18 months in the 70s, and I had the only EEG machine of the whole country over there. And it was quite an interesting way of doing neurology. But you have certainly very well rendered the whole Moroccan spirit. On one hand, you have it's a crossing between Spain, Europe, and Africa. It's a crossing between religions. People are amazingly keen in exchanges. What the question it's did you have to look for all those Jewish remnants? Because I have to say, I lived there and I knew Jewish people, I knew the Jewish merchants and all this, but I'd never seen the mosques. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. Did you have to look for them, or
No.
were they obvious now?
No. You know what, Joel? I don't know. I don't think that the driver knew that we were Jewish to start with.
Uh-huh.
And even so, it seems as though visiting the Jewish areas and the synagogues and so on are part of the typical tour that they take anyone on. Because I've also talked to a non-Jewish friend who's been to Morocco recently, and they were also taken to see different synagogues and pointed out different things about Jewish life. And it turns out that the current king, Mohammed VI, has been trying very much to promote this discussion about Jewish culture in Morocco, maybe as a touristic thing, I don't know why. But the whole idea was everybody kept saying repeatedly how good the relationships were between the Jews and the Muslims and the Christians. At one time, of course, the Christians were the bad people because they kicked the Jews and the Muslims out of Spain during the Inquisition. So the Jews and the Muslims were in the same boat basically at that time. But they're trying to say we're tolerant.
This reminds me of a trip we had in Syria. In fact, we showed the picture, and where as visitors we had the impression that this was really a perfect living together of three religions, and we were there just a month before the civil war started, and we were completely off the rail of reality. And I think people can show a certain aspect to probably to Jewish visitors, to Catholic visitors. It's when we lived there, there was relatively few Jewish people, and there was lots of city legends circulating about this Jewish who left with billions of dollars after selling oil to through illegal ways. Now that I see that, I think it's very difficult in just traveling to really. People can show you what they want somehow. And I hope it's true.
Well,
thank you very much.
I can tell you, Joel, and everybody, clearly, if not all been harmonious over the years, if not, 250,000 Jewish people would
yes.
After the war.
Yes, absolutely.
Paul Harrison, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. And I apologize to everybody. I can't get my camera to work. Thank you, Paul, for this overview of quite a wonderful country. I have a couple of questions. One, what do the dung beetles live on? And two, in that area of the dunes, are the settlements ever threatened by the dunes moving, or are they fairly static?
I can't answer either question. I know the dung beetles that I've seen in other parts of sub-Saharan Africa were living on, I guess, animal dung is why, and they rolled bits of dung balls around these beetles. But I'm not sure what amount of dung there would be in this part, except that camels do come through them and probably have dung from camels. I don't know. I didn't ask about that.
Yeah.
Somebody probably knows more than I do about dung beetles.
I'll just say they were introduced in Australia to get rid of the dung, and the fly problem in Australia resolved tremendously as a result of the dung not being there for breeding flies. And I was going to ask you, were you troubled by insects?
Not at all. I didn't use any insect repellent when I was there.
Good, so they're working, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
Andy Eisen, and then I think, who else did I see had a hand up? Andy, you had your hand up.
I don't know whether you can see this. I'll give it a go because I don't want to come out and load my photographs. But this is a picture of argan trees on the way down to the coast.
Right.
And there are goats that climb up the argan trees the whole time.
Yes, yeah.
You see those?
We did not. We passed the area, but we was pointed out that there were often goats that you might see from the road, but we did not see any.
Didn't see them. Yeah, I thought it was quite cute actually. Yeah.
I would like to complete the argan story because the goats are involved in the argan. The goats eat the fruit and reject the grain, the piln, comment on dit le noyau? The pit.
The nut, yeah.
And the women recolt the pit under the trees and make the oil from there. So there is a
Symbiosis.
complex.
Yeah. Right.
And Junker, you had your hand up at one time. I don't know if your question got answered.
No, I was the one that made the comment about the dung beetle.
Oh, you were just commenting. Excellent. Okay.
Can I ask a question about Berber, the indigenous people? I was just checking online. They are pretty integrated, right? Are they pretty integrated in the general population? And I think one picture you show about the 4 different languages printed on some public sign. Bourbon language is on the 3rd, so it must be recognized pretty publicly.
Yes, the Berbers are considered one of the important constituents of Moroccan society. So the sign that had all 4, in addition to the usual 3 that are accessible everywhere, was Hebrew, but that was in a synagogue area.
Mm-hmm.
But in many of the other monuments, you will see 3 languages.
Mm-hmm.
Often you'll see English, but you always see Arabic and you always see the Berber language.
Mm.
Those are the 2 most common together. And then in tourist sites, they'll often have English in addition to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't see Hebrew.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I remember in Montreal, there are some Bourbon people from Morocco, and they are French speaking.
Yes.
Yeah, and they very well educated. So yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Still many of them are nomadic people who live in the mountains and they herd sheep and they move from one place to the other.
I see. So they do still have their own community.
They do.
And they speak a different language because they have a written different language, right?
Yes, they speak a different language. Berber is a totally different language from Arabic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Michael.
Oh, superb photographs, as expected, which is wonderful. Could you clarify again the relationship between the two tour companies? Well, I didn't quite get the relationship between the two that you went with. And the third point is, how many people were with your group?
There's four of us and a driver. And we purposely wanted to make sure that we had a big enough vehicle that would be very comfortable for four people, especially for long drives, squashed together. We went with a Vancouver-based company, but as you would expect, they subcontract to a local company in Morocco. So the Vancouver-based company is called Best Way Tours and Safaris. And the company in Morocco that they subcontracted to was called Morocco Discovery Boutique Travel Agency.
So the Best Ways Travel organized that arrangement and that connection. So you started out with them, and then they picked it up and organized the internal part of it with through the other company. Is that?
Yes, and I think it's worthwhile. From what I found out, it's worthwhile just checking what you can see online, because Best Ways, probably with guidance from the company in Morocco, came up with a proposal with an itinerary where we would stay or the type of hotels that we would stay at a price. And then when I went online, I found a different company that had something similar. Some things were for what I was interested in was better than what Best Way Tours had suggested, and it was much cheaper. So I went back to Best Way Tours and said, "Here's a slightly different itinerary. Many of the same things that you have, but a couple of things slightly different. Could you redo it and come up with a new price?" And then when I told them what the keeper company was prepared to have me pay, they said, "We can't match that price. You have to pay extra." Anyhow, our agency in Morocco is registered with a tourism agency.
I understood that.
Yeah, it's not. They have to pay for insurance and various other liability, whatever. So we can't match it, but we'll see what we can do. So they came down in price, and we felt more comfortable using somebody in Vancouver, just in case things didn't go properly when we were there. We would have a local person in Vancouver to contact immediately and said, "Hey, we're having some troubles here. Can you look into it?"
Have you done something similar on other trips?
I did that with a trip that we did to Peru many years ago with a totally different travel agency in Vancouver. It was called Go Away Travel. And I had used them because I'd been to a presentation by them about Peru. And I got the feeling that they were very knowledgeable about Peru and had been there and knew where we should and shouldn't go. So I used them, but they subcontracted to a local Peruvian agency. When I talked to the local Peruvian agency people there, the driver and guide, they said they would not accept arrangements directly with themselves from a Canadian, because that would be undercutting the Canadian travel agency. On the other hand, I think the Moroccan people were prepared to deal with us directly if we chose to do so, and it probably would save us a bit of money, because obviously the travel agency in Vancouver has to make a living too. They have to make some money, so they can't just charge what the Moroccan agency would charge.
Okay, thank you. That's very good.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. A great audience, and for participating afterwards. Before I finish, I just want to mention that next month, the session will be on February the 13th, just before Valentine's Day. And Andy Eisen, who is here today, he is going to talk about his particular love of Yorkshire in England. And so we look forward to that. And I'm happy to also say that we are now filled with respect to speakers until the end of the academic year. So if anybody's interested in presenting, you can start looking at September, October, November, or usually we don't do it in December unless it's very, I'm not sure when the Thursdays are in December yet, but we're full until the summer. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And I'll stop the recording.